Iran set up Hezbollah early on to have a cutout, somebody who could independently carry out terrorist attacks with, quote, no fingerprints back to Tehran.
Founded in the early 80s in Lebanon under the guidance of Ayatollah Khomeini, Hezbollah wasted little time before striking American installations.
The day after this attack on the embassy here in Beirut, the death toll has continued to climb. It is believed that before the counting is over, more than 60 people will be found to have died, at least 16 of them Americans.
Hezbollah's next attack would prove even more deadly, attacking multinational peacekeeping forces stationed in Beirut following Lebanon's civil war.
At that point, this had been the largest non-nuclear explosion ever recorded. We worked for 4 days trying to find people who were buried, and then we continued to work just to find pieces of bodies, to put them together. Every piece of a body we wanted to bury and not just leave the bodies under the rubble.
Their intention in attacking us in Beirut was to drive the United States out of Lebanon and ultimately out of the Middle East.
Despite repeated proclamations that terrorists won't affect U.S. foreign policy, Muslim forces in Lebanon achieve their goal when Reagan withdraws all 1,400 Marines to the safety of offshore ships.
When we pulled our troops out, we essentially sent a message to the Iranians, you win. We will respond to terrorism by retreating. It was a terrible message to send, and we've been paying the price for that ever since.
And that was more from the dynamic new documentary called Iranium. The producer, Raphael Shore, continues to join me, as well as Fox News Middle East and terrorism expert Waleed Faris is with us, and who's also featured in the film. The story exposes the dark details of Iran's history with Hezbollah and how the Islamic Republic has provided both financial and material means to attack Western targets all over the world through acts of religious terrorism. I might have one small disagreement on this and certainly what happened in Lebanon. But before I get to that, Hezbollah is a surrogate group funded to commit acts of terror directly by Iran. That's what it was founded for.
I was in Lebanon when that happened. I saw basically how Hezbollah was formed by the Iranian Revolutionary Islamic Guards. They first started in the Bekaa Valley. They moved to the south, then to Beirut. I was there when the explosions occurred. It woke me up in the morning. And that was the beginning of the campaign of Hezbollah on behalf of Iran, against the multinational force, then against Israel, then against the Lebanese themselves, and from there on, throughout the world.
The Iranian regime thrives on hiding behind other proxy parties. In general, they want to show one face to the West and not let people understand what is going on in their minds and in their ideology. I think that's probably why they've been speaking out against this film, Iranium, as well, because we set the record straight. We show in their own words, their own ideology, and people in Iran do not like this to be seen.
All right, so they basically commit acts of terror by funding these outside groups. They have plausible deniability on their part, and they say, oh, we had nothing to do with this, when in fact we all know that none of that is true. All right, through the prism of history, I guess we could all analyze Reagan's move to pull out the troops at the time. But he also had many other challenges that he was dealing with. You know, an economy that he was trying to rebuild, and an evil empire and Soviet expansionism, and, you know, how many battles on how many fronts can we fight?
Well, I think he was badly advised. That's my opinion, because I was on this other side and then on this side in the archives, and I saw what has happened, basically. It would have taken President Reagan to call on a larger force. Hezbollah was very small at the time. And that larger force would have been supported by the Lebanese army. And Lebanon would have been extracted from Iranian and Syrian influence long time ago. The price of not doing this, basically, is Hezbollah taking over Lebanon, pushing everything to the south, and flaring 2 wars with Israel, Syria having the long-range missiles, and giving Iran all that time to have their missiles and possibly the bomb.
I think that we shouldn't pick only on President Reagan, because what we show in this film is that it's been a succession of presidents since the revolution in Iran in 1979 of misreading the regime. That's one of the main points that we show in this film. that American presidents have not understood the nature of what's going on in these countries.
Isn't it a little even deeper than that? In the 9/11 Commission report, used very profound words. I didn't agree with everything in the report, but they were at war with us. We weren't at war with them. They've been at war with the West for a long time. You know, but even going back to the beginning of this regime, when they held Americans hostage for 444 days, they were declaring war against the West. And, you know, a pretty brazen act, but I think they feared Reagan when he came in. Otherwise, I don't think they would have released the hostages the day he was inaugurated.
Well, I think the 9/11 Commission was right in one thing, that the jihadists in general terms, including the Iranians, have been waging this war, not just a war of terrorism, a war of ideas. And one of the major achievements they have been able to do is to deny the American public the understanding that we were at war. How can we be confronting them if we didn't know that they were actually against us? And that was the drama of 9/11 in my sense. All
right, we're going to take a break and we'll talk. I wanted to get to you guys about how women are treated under Sharia. We'll hit that. And also coming up, we're going to analyze Ahmadinejad's radical rhetoric and what it could mean for America's future. That much more straight ahead.
Ahmadinejad narrative is very strange for all of us. He seems from another planet. He talks about a world without America.
امام عزیز فرمودی که باید مستکبرین جهان منهدم شوند. زنگ شمارش معکوس اضمحلال قدرت اهریمنی آمریکا به صدا در آمده است.
In 1998, the Iranians carried out a test to launch a Scud missile from a barge in the Caspian Sea. Many people believe that this is what the Iranians would like to do with the United States, put a missile in a cargo ship going off of our coast and attack Baltimore, attack New York, attack Washington, D.C. From 100 miles off our coast, we'd never see it. Another scenario, clearly, is to bring a small, man-portable nuclear weapon, a backpack nuclear weapon, across the Mexican border, which is, most Americans understand, is not very well protected.
Hezbollah has been making linkages with Mexican drug cartels, not to compete with them in narcotics trade, but rather to use their already established channels of entry into the United States, up from Mexico, through the United States, and all the way on up even into Canada.
When Mahmoud Ahmadinejad talks about a world without America not only being desirable but achievable, he could mean probably one thing, and that is what's known as a strategic electromagnetic pulse attack.
An electromagnetic pulse weapon is essentially a nuclear weapon that is exploded in the atmosphere up above. It doesn't hit the ground, it's exploded up in the air. It sends out pulse waves, shock waves.
You have to understand what this pulse is. It's tremendously high energy. Every wire will pick up this pulse, take the energy, and burn out whatever's at the end.
An EMP weapon, meaning a small nuclear bomb, detonated above the center of the United States would literally take down the entire power grid of this country.
Not only would the power grid be out, it would be out for probably months, but every piece of electronics that we use, from pacemakers to phones to cars to gasoline pumps to water pumps, would all be fried.
The Blue Ribbon Commission established by the Congress concluded that this was an eminently achievable way of effecting catastrophic effects on the United States, specifically devastating the electrical grid of this country, and with it all of the infrastructures that depend upon it: food, water, sewage, medical, commercial, financial, transportation. According to the chairman of this Blue Ribbon Commission, within a year, 9 out of 10 Americans would be dead as a result of exposure, starvation, disease.
This country would cease to exist as we know it.
And I'm back with Waleed Phares, Fox News Middle East and terrorism expert and the producer of Iranium, the film we have been discussing tonight, Raphael Shore. All right, let's start with this electromagnetic pulse attack. And what you're saying here in this film, it would take down the entire power grid of this country, and literally, probably for months, it would basically put America into what position?
Well, the Iranian regime has always said, and Ahmadinejad in particular, that we can live without America. A world can live without America. This is a different attitude than Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda would acquire targets and try to hit them regardless. The Iranian regime is preparing itself for a strategic engagement with the United States when it can. And the EMP, basically, that Raphael could talk about, will take out our capacity, not just of responding, but of acting as a nation.
All right, so they could have a test launch, as you say, off the coast of Baltimore, D.C., or New York, 100 miles out. There's nothing we could do to stop that?
It's very difficult. As we show in the film, America is very porous. If Iran has nuclear weapons, the possibilities are enormous. EMP is one of them. But if they could pass on a nuclear bomb to terrorist organizations, they could give it to people who are infiltrating from the Mexican border. There's any number of possibilities.
How would they get that electromagnetic pulse to go over the center of the United States? How would they do that?
That would need to be perhaps shot from a barge, and that would be exploded over the United States.
From the Gulf, or?
There are a lot of angles. I mean, let's keep in mind that the Iranian regime and the Venezuelan regime have signed a strategic treaty. Now, between Venezuela and the United States is the same distance, that these missiles now are being tested in Iran from one point to the other, the same distance.
All right, so we often hear Ahmadinejad talk about wiping Israel off the map. You know, we know Bibi Netanyahu always said they view Israel, which they want to destroy first, as the great Satan. They view the, as the little Satan.
Little Satan.
And the United States is the big Satan. So his real goal is to get rid of America. Wouldn't he first try and take out Israel, though?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's no question when hate is so severe, so intense, they have two enemies that are very strong. It's not just Israel and America as well. It's also Europe. It's the entire Christian world. It's the Western world.
Yeah. The next logical question, how close are they to the scenarios that you're describing in this movie? How close are they to being able to accomplish this goal, knowing that, you know what, they think this is of the highest order, this is their mission, this is what they want? How close are they to actually achieving this?
Sean, there are two theories in town here in Washington. One is that we are focusing on the nuclear bomb. How close are they? I have a different theory. They are really working on the delivery system. They are working on establishing the missiles, because if they have launching pads out of Iran, potentially out of Hezbollah in Lebanon, possibly with Syria, now they are having facilities in Eritrea and the Red Sea. And as I said earlier, in Venezuela, once they would reach the number of missiles that they need for a first strike, if that is the case, then they'll bring their nukes. And at the same time, we won't be able to take out all these ramps.
And this lunatic, and by the way, for people that deny such evil could happen, are we denying the last 100 years of human history and communism and fascism and totalitarianism and Nazism and the killing fields in Cambodia leading up to later in the next century, 9/11? And the attack on the Trade Center and the Pentagon?
I think human capacity to try to ignore evil is incredible. It is astonishing. And I think that's what makes this film so unbelievable, because why don't people know about it? Why is this not reported? It's not like Ahmadinejad doesn't talk about it. It's not like it's not written in the Constitution of Iran that they want to take over the rest of the world with their Islamic regime. So it's not a hidden issue at all.
All right. When we come back, why, when dealing with a country like Iran or an Ahmadinejad, negotiations will never work? That and much more.
Clinton, through Bush, and now Obama have all believed that there was some level of benefits that Iran could be offered that would get it to give up its nuclear program.
I don't think that one can proceed with this regime by negotiation. They regard this attempt or desire to negotiate as a sign of fear and weakness.